Rick liked to travel long distances. He liked the road and new places. This time, he was alone without a partner. An old colleague has been getting sick quite often lately, and now he missed the trip again. But Rick didn't miss the company at all. Alone, he thought a lot about life, remembering his childhood. The guy's father was also a trucker. He transported goods all over the country. He met many people, including bandits. Somehow, they ambushed his truck, lured him out of the car, shot him, and stole the car along with its contents in an unknown direction. Rick was only 5 years old then, but for the rest of his life, he remembered the terrible cry of his mother, who learned about the misfortune. Mom cried at night, and Rick was offended by her, not understanding how hard it's for a young woman to raise her son alone. It's good that his grandfather helped them, often taking his grandson to his place for the weekend. The boy adored his grandfather, Peter. He was a strict and stern, but kind and fair old man. And grandfather's affairs were truly masculine and serious. He often took the boy with him to the garage to help him fix his old car. Then his grandfather instilled in him a love of technology, and he taught his grandson everything he himself knew. After that, the guy graduated from school, underwent additional training, and passed exams for all categories of driver's licenses. And he went into the army a real professional. The unit commander was proud of the fighter, citing his skill and the tank as an example of equipment in perfect technical condition. Rick returned from the army as a tall, strong, and broad-shouldered soldier. His mother didn't immediately recognize his native Rick, and Rick watched sadly as his once beautiful mother, who had never married, had aged. Rick had fun for a short time in civilian life, as he really wanted to free his mother from eternal worries due to lack of money. The young man, without much difficulty, got a job in a good trucking company, where he was immediately entrusted with a large trailer. A month later, he brought home a good salary to his mother, made repairs in the apartments, and changed all the furniture. And after 3 months, he got married. The girls looked at a prominent non-drinking guy, and each of them tried to conquer such a promising groom. Rick didn't have time to look back, as he found himself at the wedding ceremony. The young wife Julia turned out to be faster than other girls. After the wedding, she found a rented apartment that could be redeemed over time if her husband began to earn more. And Rick began to earn more. He took extra trips, was rarely at home, leaving Julia alone for a long time. His partner had warned him several times about how such work zeal usually ends, and in the end, it happened. One day, Rick returned home and found his wife in the arms of another man. They parted without scandals. Rick took his things and went home to his mother. His mother was not worried, deciding that her son didn't love his wife very much. The woman didn't know Rick suffered from the betrayal of his wife, and how he hoped that an unfaithful wife would come to him, ask for forgiveness, and life would flow again in a calm direction. But Julia didn't come to him. She left for a big city, and there she soon married a wealthy businessman. She was smart and didn't waste any time. Rick grieved but continued to live. He drove his trailer, and on the weekends he rested and helped his mother with the housework. And today, he dreamed about how he could return home and have a delicious dinner in a calm atmosphere. The guy drove all day until it got dark, and the highway was noticeably empty. Suddenly, he saw in the distance on the roadside a strange figure, wrapped in black. It was a woman standing on the road, hoping to stop a ride. Rick slammed on the brakes. Night was approaching, and he couldn't leave a man alone on the road. The nun climbed into the cabin. She greeted him, crossed herself with a flourish, and turned to Rick to thank him for his kindness. The guy thought to himself, "What a beautiful woman." Huge green eyes looked at the young man from under the black cassock. Such eyes are only in fairy tales among princesses. "Thank you. I didn't know what to do. It gets dark quickly. There's no one, and I'm very afraid of wolves." Rick answered, putting on an important look of an experienced driver. "In our time, you don't need to be afraid of wolves, but of people, because there are so many criminals walking in the wild." And he immediately blushed with embarrassment and thought to himself, "I need to talk like a 100-year-old grandfather, otherwise I might have frightened the nun." But the young girl was neither afraid nor embarrassed. She turned out to be very sweet and sociable, and she is not at all like the timid, laconic servants of the monastery. Beauty introduced herself as Maria and began to question Rick about his work. The guy willingly answered the sensible questions of the nun, and gradually the conversation ceased to be constrained. He asked, "Where are you going, mother?" Maria smiled and replied, "We go in the same direction, and I'm not a mother since I left the monastery forever." Rick's surprise knew no bounds. "Why are you dressed like that?" Maria replied, "Because a fashion boutique has not yet been built in the holy monastery, and I left there in this form." And then she laughed, but then grew gloomy and added, "I need to see my father for the last time because he is dying, and I want to ask his forgiveness. The abbess did not stop me. She blessed me and let me go into the world." Maria told Rick her sad story. It turns out that the girl's father was a very rich businessman, widely known in business circles. His mother took care of the house and her daughter. Their life went on as usual. Their parents loved each other until a terrible disaster happened. Maria's mother, a young flowering woman, was diagnosed with cancer. She died 6 months later. The father, blackened with grief, hugged the coffin at the funeral and sobbed. And when Maria saw how her mother was lowered into the grave, she fainted from horror and hopelessness. It was a very difficult year in the girl's life. Father began to drink every day, locking himself in the office, and Maria wandered around the house alone. It's good that the businessman turned out to be a strong-willed person and stopped in time, having gone headlong into business. But then her dad got married a second time. He brought into the house a woman who remarkably resembled her dead mother. Maria almost cried out when she saw the bride on the threshold. But the father's new wife had a completely different disposition than Maria's mother. She was treacherous, deceitful, and greedy. The stepmother's own son, the same age as Maria, settled in the businessman's mansion with his mother. Father, inspired by a new passionate love, didn't notice what was going on in his absence. Stepmother's son Arthur turned out to be like his mother. He was a spoiled youth, and when he saw the beautiful young Maria, he immediately began to openly pester her. And one day, he ambushed the girl in the garden and almost raped her. Maria, in a critical emotional state, ran to her father's office, where she confessed everything to her businessman dad. But her father, fascinated by the beautiful stepmother, decided that his own daughter had set up all this in order to quarrel the man with his young wife. A scandal broke out, and Maria went to the monastery in tears, where she lived in fasting and prayer for 3 years. Maria recently learned that her dad fell ill and is dying. She felt that she could no longer be behind the thick walls of the holy monastery among the modest and quiet sisters. Her soul begged for freedom, and the desire to hug the sinful but beloved father was very strong. Therefore, Maria found herself on the side of the highway, leading to the city of her childhood, to the beautiful mansion where her father was dying. The girl said sadly, "I don't know if I can get home, since my stepmother and her son are unlikely to let me go to my dad." Rick didn't think for a long time. "Maria, there's nothing for you to do there alone. It seems that Arthur is a desperate scoundrel. Let me go there with you. Only first, we will stop by the store and buy you clothes. I'm not promising you a boutique, but you won't look like a beggar." In the city, Rick handed over his cargo, leaving the truck at the base, then sat and waited for Maria at the store. When she approached him, dressed in a light, airy dress, the guy realized that he fell in love with the girl firmly and forever. Young people took a taxi and quickly drove to a luxurious 3-story mansion. The gate was opened by a guard who recognized the former mistress of the house. Maria and Rick climbed the wide marble stairs and proceeded to the businessman's bedroom. When the girl opened the door, she saw an emaciated old man lying on the bed. She rushed to her dying father, hugged him, and cried. The sick man looked at his daughter with eyes full of anguish. "My daughter, forgive me. I'm to blame for you." Maria led Rick to the bed. "Dad, meet him. He is a very good person." The old man held out his withered palm to the guy. "I'm Maxwell Johnson. I'm very pleased to see you with your daughter." The men shook hands. The bedroom door opened wide and a woman's voice was heard. "Darling, wake up. The notary has arrived. You don't want to leave your wife without an inheritance, do you?" A tall, showy lady entered the room, accompanied by a man in a business suit and a young man in a bright shirt. It was a stepmother with her son Arthur and a notary. A silent scene ensued. Arthur opened his mouth in surprise. The notary felt something was wrong, turned around and ran out of the bedroom. The stepmother began to swear, and her beautiful face was instantly distorted by a disgusting grimace. "What is this nun doing here? She slandered my son, and now she has decided to finally come to my house." Maria shuddered and said quietly, "It doesn't matter. This is my parents' house. I advise you to get out of here." Rick silently approached the woman, took her by the elbow, led her out of the room, found some door, pushed his stepmother into a dark room which turned out to be a closet, and turned the key in the keyhole. Arthur took a fighting stance, which made everyone in the bedroom laugh a lot. Rick easily picked him up by the collar and sent him to his mother in the pantry so that the relatives would not miss each other. Maria called security and the businessman tried to get up. He took a deep breath and told a story that amazed everyone. A man in his prime fell ill a year after his daughter left. He didn't like doctors, so the disease began to progress. The father was rapidly losing weight and his hair and teeth began to fall out. His wife and stepson understood how it would all end, so they first hinted and then became insolent and began to demand that a new will be drawn up, where he had to transfer his property and business to members of the new family. The arrival of Maria and Rick upset their plans, and they failed to complete the paperwork. Maxwell Johnson wept, repenting. "They will not see my inheritance as their heirs. I won't let my daughter be a beggar." When Rick heard Maria's father's story, he frowned. Something alarmed him, and a terrible guess was not long in coming. "Maxwell Johnson, you need to call an ambulance and the police. I think you need to do an examination." The police arrived quickly. The police briefly listened to the businessman, after which they snapped the handcuffs on the hands of the stepmother and stepson. Rick was right. The examination showed that a large concentration of a poisonous substance was found in the blood of Maxwell Johnson, slowly killing the body of a man. The businessman had to be treated for a long time. He slowly came to his senses, although the doctors didn't yet dare to give optimistic forecasts. His wife and stepson were awaiting trial. They were charged with a serious charge, threatening to turn into a long prison term. Maria took the reins of her father's big firm into her own hands, and she did it very well. She and Rick became a loving couple. They filed an application for marriage registration and began preparations for the wedding. Maxwell Johnson was proud of his son-in-law. He sent out an invitation to the celebration throughout the country. He went on a well-deserved rest, remaining an advisor to his daughter on the affairs of the company. Maria didn't forget the monastery where she lived for a long time, and she secretly donated a huge amount for the restoration of the temple, located at the Holy Monastery.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. "Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?" "We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs. Gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized." Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. "All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason." "What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do." "I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you." "Please." Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, "Yes. That's Nick for you." Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, "I'm very sorry." Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, "Get his boss here immediately." It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. "What is that idiot doing?" "All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next." Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. "If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you." I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office, angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.